And Fox San Antonio's Jessica Headley.
And I'm Ryan Wolf.
Our greatest responsibility is to serve our
Treasure Valley communities,
the El Paso, Las Cruces communities,
Eastern Iowa communities,
Mid-Michigan communities.
We are extremely proud of the quality, balanced journalism that CBS 4 News produces.
But
we are concerned about trouble and irresponsible, one-sided news stories plaguing our country.
The sharing of biased and false news has become all too common on social media. More alarming, some media outlets publish these same fake stories without checking facts first.
The sharing of biased and
False news has become all too common on social media.
More alarming, some media outlets true without checking facts first.
Unfortunately, some members of the media use their platforms to push their own personal bias and agenda to control exactly what people think, and this is extremely dangerous to our democracy.
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 Border czar. Vice President Harris was not a border czar.
Meantime, Vice President and border czar Kamala Harris facing some backlash.
What he said about Harris and immigration was not true. She was never appointed border czar.
And this will be her first visit to the U.S.-Mexico border region since she was appointed as the border czar by President Biden.
People are going to have to counter the misinformation. You already hear folks talking about the border czar. She wasn't the border czar.
President Biden tapped Kamala Harris, Vice President Kamala Harris, to be the border czar.
Now, she wasn't the border czar. That's what Republicans labeled her.
They were very critical of Kamala Harris, especially in her role as border czar.
Now what she's up against is folks lying about her border record, calling her a border czar.
Kamala Harris, who was appointed as the border czar.
The Biden team didn't declare her the border czar. They wanted her to work on kind of the root causes of immigration.
There has been so much criticism against Kamala Harris. You know, she was the border czar.
Calling her sort of the border czar, which wasn't necessarily the case.
So the border, if they weren't planning to address it in a major way, do not make her your border czar. She met with some of the Northern Triangle countries, but nothing has effectively changed.
Correcting, there's not record crime right now. Number one, Harris was put in charge, as you said earlier, of combating the roots of immigration. She was not and is not the border czar.
And the Biden administration did task Vice President Kamala Harris with the issue of migrant crossings, naming her the so-called border czar.
This is today putting Vice President Kamala Harris in charge.
Federal facilities being overwhelmed by the number of unaccompanied minors arriving each and every day. Our D.C. Bureau Chief Ben Kennedy joins us live with more. Ben.
Well, Louis Nicole, this is a key assignment for Vice President Harris. It's a bit of an uphill battle. She admits it'll not be easy, but she says it is so important.
But the Vice President's agreed.
Agreed to be the point person on immigration.
Madam Vice President, thank you. I gave you a tough job.
There's no question that this is a challenging situation.
The situation centers around the biggest surge in migrants to cross the U.S.-Mexico border in 20 years. Facilities are overflowing with people. Many are children.
Children should be moving more quickly through those facilities. That is what our policy central focus is right now.
The Biden administration has lost control of the southern border.
But the White House says not true and blames the previous administration.
So this new surge we're dealing with now started with the last administration, but it's our responsibility to deal with it humanely.
The VP is tasked to stem the influx of migrants, deal with the root cause driving them to the U.S., and to lead diplomatic efforts.
I look forward to engaging in diplomacy with government, with private sector, with civil society, and the leaders of each in El Salvador, Guatemala, and Honduras.
And Vice President Harris is only 3 hours into her new assignment. So far, no word of any travel plans. The White House did, however, send a team to the border this week to meet with Mexican leaders.
We've been to the border. We've been to the border.
You haven't been to the border.
And I haven't been to Europe. And I mean, I don't understand the point that you're making.
The most effective way to destroy people
is to deny and obliterate their own understanding of
A majority of Biden's executive orders revolve around immigration, DACA protections reinstated, travel ban to 7 Muslim-majority countries lifted, expansion of immigration enforcement stopped, construction of the border wall halted, deferrals of deportations for Liberians extended, an order excluding undocumented immigrants from the census rescinded.
Now, whether it's intentional or not, it could be argued that the United States government has become the middleman in a large-scale, multi-billion-dollar child trafficking operation.
It's undoubted. No one can deny the fact that there are countless people who are harmed on the journey up to the United States, who are trafficked, who are enslaved here in the United States. And if we want to talk about family separations, I'd like to point out that this administration's policies have led to 500,000 children being separated by their parents, coming to the United States by themselves and subjected to who knows what and lost by this Department of Health and Human Services. No one cares. No one cares where those kids are in this administration. No one's going out and looking for them. So for all these crocodile tears that are shed about what happened in a prosecution policy during the Trump administration, nobody cares about the 85,000 plus kids that this administration has lost and the 500,000 kids who have been trafficked here during this administration.
Well, let's get one thing straight. Under President Trump, illegal immigration went to a 45-year low, 83% decline in illegal immigration. There's been several studies saying 31% of women that make that journey through cartels get sexually assaulted. So let me ask you a question. I'll make a point. When 83% less people are coming, how many migrants didn't die crossing the border when 83% less were coming? How many people didn't die? How many people off the terror screening database didn't try to come to the country because Border Patrol's 100% vigilant on the line and now overwhelmed? How many women and children didn't get sex trafficking to the United States, forced into sex slavery, forced labor, debt bondage? How many billions did the criminal cartels not make? Under President Biden, where they call this humane, over 1,700 migrants have died on U.S. soil. Historic record, not counting the Darien Gap in Mexico and Central America. 112,000 Americans dying from fentanyl. Historical increase in sex trafficking, forced labor, and debt bondage. Almost 100,000 missing kids that were released by ORR. 440,000 unaccompanied children entered the country through the service of the cartels. Someone needs to explain to me how that's humane, any of this stuff. And a record number of people off the terrorist watch list being arrested. 1.9 million gotaways. That statement alone should convince anybody on either side, 1.9 million gotaways, the border is not secure.
Brief President Biden.
You mean on this specific
just generally.
case?
No, in your role as FBI director.
I mean, I don't know that I could give you a number.
Is it like weekly, monthly, daily?
It's not at a regular cadence. There have been times when there have been months at a time when I haven't, and then there have been times when several days apart I have. It's always with other people.
The vice president, is she typically there?
Often has been.
Okay, so when did you notice his decline?
In my interactions, in my role, all my interactions with the current president have been completely professional.
Right, but I mean the cognitive decline. I'm not saying he treated you unprofessionally, just maybe not picking things up as quickly as he used to.
Again, I don't meet with him very often, but what you're describing is not something that I've observed during my interactions.
We've had it observed so often that the ranking member and Mr. Schiff on this committee have said that he could no longer continue as a candidate. And so, since you're the FBI director, I was just sort of wondering, like, who's running the country? Like if something bad happened, you'd have to go brief President Biden about it right now. God forbid.
And on any number of occasions, I have briefed the president, and as I said, those briefings have all been uneventful and unremarkable.
Well, I can imagine them being uneventful. But in the work where the vice president's also present, like you say, there's like more than half the time there's these briefings, she's there too?
I don't know if I said more than half the time. Certainly, there have been times where she's been present. There have been other times where she hasn't.
I take you at your word when you say this is the most complicated threat environment you've ever observed over a long career in law enforcement. And I'm just kind of wondering, with this assassination attempt, with the invasion at our border, with all the Hamas that have been let in, that you've talked about and briefed about, Like, is Biden up to it? And if he's not up to it, and you're a guy who's been regularly briefing it, like, who's been in on this conspiracy to hide the real Joe Biden from all of us for years? It never occurred to you that this guy wasn't up to it in all these briefings you did?
As I said, my briefings with the president have all been completely fine.
Were they between 10 a.m. and
He's
4
asked
p.m.?
questions. There hasn't been anything of note in the area that you're talking about.
Yeah, did you ever have to brief him before 10 a.m. or after 4 p.m.? We hear those are his good hours.
I certainly times that I have briefed have included outside those hours.
I'm just kind of wondering if you were being straight with all of us about how things were going with him. I guess we'll have to figure that out.
You can count on me to be straight with you, sir.
We'll see.
The most effective way to destroy people is to deny and obliterate their own understanding of their history.